now?
What we're going to do today with regard to the oil change does not require a very elaborate set of tools. What I have in front of me to do oil and filter change is just some basic sockets and a couple of ratchet handles. We could use either one of them and some extensions. This particular set of ratchets is what's called a 3/8 drive. It refers to the section, the length of that section of that little square right there. That's 3/8 of an inch. So that's commonly referred to as a 3/8 inch drive. There are really three common sets used in the U.S. A 1/4 inch drive, a 3/8 inch drive, and a 1/2 inch drive. Most of the time, for most of the work that we will do, a 3/8 drive is very sufficient. This particular ratchet rotates in a couple of directions. It's a Craftsman. This one is also a Craftsman, but you can see it only turns and it doesn't swivel like this one does. We could use either one of them. This one is fine. You can see that our ratchet turns in either direction, so I can reverse the direction for on and off. So it locks one way when I turn it when I'm removing a bolt, and of course it locks the other way when I want to screw the bolt back on. Mercedes use a metric system for measuring the size of the bolts, and a common set of sockets. This particular set goes from 10 millimeters all the way up to about 19 millimeters, and again that refers to one side on a hex bolt. This particular device is called a speed handle. It's very useful for a couple of the things that we'll do today, so we'll be using that. And then extensions just extend the length of that handle for as much as I want, so that if I have a bolt that's way in an ugly place, of course I can get to it with a socket applied to some extensions. It's kind of like a little toy set, right? I could apply the ratchet to the extensions like that, or if I'm just real close, I could apply the socket directly to the ratchet like that. So it happens that the bolt, the plug, the oil drain plug, is a 13 millimeter, so that's what I'm going to use, and I'll just attach it to a ratchet like that. I'm going to drain it into a drain pan that looks like this. I bought this one just at a local auto supply store. You can see I've used it quite a bit. All we do is we take this little funnel and we screw it on to the actual pan, and when the oil drains, it drains right into the container. And then later, when we want to dispose of the oil at the recycling places in town, we can just unscrew the top. And so it's a very convenient thing. You don't have to be moving oil from one place to the next. It's all contained right in our...
That's obviously large enough you can do 1 or 2 oil changes in that, right?
Yes, I can do several. This particular container will hold 3 or 4 gallons, perhaps 3 gallons, I believe. Mercedes, though, has a pretty big reservoir of oil. We're going to use 8 quarts of oil, 2 gallons of oil in this oil change, and of course that's a real advantage because we have so much more oil to use to hold the contaminants of the engine. Normally, there's different opinions about how frequently oil should be changed. I like 3,000 miles. In the very old days it used to be 2,000 miles. The oil technology has improved to the point where 3,000 miles is perhaps the bottom end of it now. Some of the manufacturers allow 5,000 to 10,000 miles between oil changes. For some of the more modern cars, for the diesels, I prefer 3,000. They generate quite a few contaminants that need to be absorbed in the oil and held in suspension by the oil. So my preference is for 3,000 miles we change the oil and the filter. So let's get to that. Okay, so let's get underneath there and change the oil. I always put a piece of carpet on my garage floor. Some people prefer creepers. The modern garage floor has a lot of expansion joints in it, so it has cracks, and the creepers always stick for me. So I just get an old piece of carpet, an old remnant carpet, and throw on my garage floors, and that's what I use. So you can see the oil drain plug is kind of at the back of a pen here. So all we need to do is loosen that plug. I want to make sure we get that pen under there before it starts, but you can see that without jacking it up, it's a little tight, but it's still worth it not to put a jack under it, not to go to the trouble. So finally it will get loose enough, if I'm lucky, to where I can turn it with my hands. It's not at that point yet. There we go. And while that oil is draining, so that I get as much of it drained out as I can, I always start that way. And then I come and change the filter while the oil is draining. So let's get back to the top. And I need an extension. The same size socket fits those two bolts on the filter, but I need an extension. Let me get an extension. Now the oil filter in this particular Mercedes is contained in a canister right here. It's not a screw-on type, rather it's a canister type, what we call a canister type. I've got about a 10-inch extension on my 13mm socket, and of course counterclockwise turns that off. What I'm going to do is take the top of that canister off. You can see there are two bolts, one there, one there. I need to be careful. There are a lot of vacuum lines around this particular canister, and then there's a heater water line, and I have to kind of maneuver around that, but those are on there kind of tight. I'm going to be careful not over tighten those things. If you strip those things, you could end up with a real serious problem where the top of this will not tighten and you don't get a good O-ring seal if one of those nuts is stripped. And if that happens, you're going to pump the oil out of the engine and burn it up. It happened to my dad one time on one of these cars. He stripped out one of those bolts, and of course he paid for it dearly with a burned up engine. He didn't notice that he lost his oil pressure. So we're going to work the top of this canister off, and you can see it's got a long rod essentially that goes down through the middle of that oil filter. It's got a little oil on it, and right there is an O-ring that we're going to replace.
You do that every time you do the filter?
I do. I replace the O-ring every time, and it comes with the filter. Let's set this thing aside for now, and let me get a rag, because sometimes pulling those filters out, they drip a little bit. A couple of oil filters here. I prefer the German brands because that's what came with the original Mercedes. I'm not partial to either one of these brands, and there are others. I've got a Hengst, I don't know exactly how to pronounce that, Hengst. The particular one that fits on this Mercedes is an E196HND03. It fit Mercedes diesels for perhaps 7 or 8 years in the late 70s and early 80s. You can see that there are several possible filters, and right on the box it gives various replacements that can be used. The Bosch filter that fits this car is a number 72126. I don't care which one we use today. Let's use the Hengst. I always take the filter out because I dispose of the old filter in the new filter box. So if we take the filter and the O-ring out and just set it aside, I'm going to pull that filter out of there and put it in this box so that I minimize some of the filth associated with changing the oil. You can see that right on the top of this filter there's conveniently a little handle. So if I grab a hold of that handle, and of course this filter is going to be full of oil and it's kind of heavy, it's not dripping, I'm going to just put it in the box and throw the whole thing away. So I'll dispose of that.
hold on. Okay. Okay.
The new filter will only go one way. And you can see there's a difference between the rubber O-ring at the bottom of the filter and the rubber O-ring at the top. But what we want to do is put it in there in such a way that the little handle is on the top.
Now, if you didn't drain the oil, would that be full?
It would probably have some in the canister. It wouldn't be full, but if we pan the camera down in there, I don't know whether it's too dark to see in there or not, Gordon. Maybe if I hold the light over there, we can see in the bottom of that. How's that? You can see there's a little tube that sticks up, and of course that piece right there fits right over the tube. So there's a tube, and that will hold that position, that filter in position. So you see it wobbles around a little bit, but it's perfectly centered inside that canister now. Now,
Okay.
we want to change the O-ring. So the O-ring goes, we're just going to take that old one off, and sometimes it's kind of hard to get those things out of there. Maybe I need a little screwdriver. Okay, so now we need to get the plug back in there. You can see that the oil is almost to the point of dripping. We can never get our, rather I wouldn't be patient enough to let all of it drain out of there, but that's close enough to where I've got a sufficient amount of the oil out of there, practically all of it. So that's good enough. So now just get that plug started. I want to be sure I don't strip those threads. I'm pretty careful when I go back on to make sure it's not stripping the threads. The plug is going back in easy enough when I'm barely starting to tighten. And again, I don't want to strip that. I want it tight enough. But you can see I'm not even always at the bottom of that wrench. I'm about halfway up on that wrench. And that's tight enough. That's just a 3/8 ratchet, and that's plenty tight. Wipe that off a little bit. And so now, this particular system, let me just spin that off of there. I wipe it down a little bit. And that fits in this particular one back in there. Then my lid is over there on the workbench, but you can see that now I just have a container that's convenient. I can take it right down to the recycling center and dump it. So now I just need to add the oil to the engine. Hi Gordon, I forgot to throw that hood pad or that fender pad on the side over there. These things really do protect, and I should protect this old Mercedes. The paint is in great shape. Protect the paint in case you have a belt on and the belt buckle scratches the paint. I got this one at Napa, this fender cover, but if you just throw it over the fender, mechanics use them all the time to keep from banging up against the fender and scraping it. Now we're going to add the engine oil. It takes 8 quarts of engine oil. You can see that it fills right here at the top of this valve cover. Really, really good mechanics don't need a funnel. I do. I don't like to dump oil all over that engine, so I use a funnel to put the oil in there. You can't put it in there too fast, just as fast as it'll drain in there. I prefer fairly heavy oil for a diesel engine. This particular brand is called DELO 400. It's made by Chevron Oil. I really have a preference for it. I think it's great oil. It's recommended by all the diesel manufacturers. The particular weight on this oil is called 15W40. It stands for the thickness of the oil, the viscosity of the oil. The higher the number, the thicker the oil. I prefer a minimum of a 40 at the top end. It's a multi-viscosity oil, meaning that the viscosity of the oil will actually change with the temperature of the oil. So as the engine gets hot, theoretically the oil viscosity thickens, which is backwards to what would normally happen, but within the last 20 years or so, that technology has been developed. You'll also see in the store 10W30, perhaps as low as 520 for very, very cold climates. We live in Arizona here, Gordon and I, and prefer the heavier oils. I've used as much as 20W50 in the middle of the summer for these diesel engines, but a minimum of the 40 weight is recommended. So it's going to take 8 quarts or 2 gallons of oil.
So that's a gallon, and you've got another gallon sitting here ready.
Yes, so I need 2 gallons of oil in this engine, or 8 quarts. So you can see it's nice honey like when it goes in. When it comes out, it's awfully black as a result of suspending all those contaminants that are byproducts of the combustion process. The oil really has 2 purposes: to lubricate the engine, but also to suspend all the contaminants. So after a while, the oil is saturated with contaminants and won't hold anymore, and it doesn't do nearly as good a job as lubricating, and that's why we need to change it. And of course, I do believe that changing oil frequently enough really adds to the life of the engine. So I'm very religious about changing the oil on a periodic basis. I prefer every 3,000 miles. And you can see that when we buy it by the gallon, it goes in there pretty rapidly. Now, after we add the oil, we need to start the engine and double check and make sure that we don't have any leaks. Primarily, we want to make sure that that O-ring's sealed.
Now, do we? You hear the old proverb of "add one for the filter." What is the case in here?
Well, I never change. The filter holds about a quart of oil. I never change the oil without changing the filter. In some of the real old days, people used to change the filter every other time they changed the oil. I never believed in that. I believe that if you're going to change the oil, you need to change the filter too, because that's obviously where the contaminants get absorbed in that filter. So if you change the filter with the oil, you've got to add enough oil to also allow the engine to fill the filter back up. And that's 8 quarts. That includes the filter and the engine oil. I think actually the Mercedes spec is 7.9, but another 1/10 of a quart doesn't hurt anything. So
Okay.
I've got the 8 quarts of oil in there. Put our little cap back on that valve cover. And now we're ready to crank it up. We want to crank it and idle it slow. We don't want to rev it up right away. We want to give that engine a chance to develop oil pressure. It won't hurt it for a few seconds to run on low oil pressure, but the oil needs to be recirculated through all the components because we drained it all out. Primarily it has to fill that filter back up and get oil pressure back to the engine. So we don't want to be revving that engine up as soon as it fires after we drain the oil in. So we want to just let it idle. So now we're going to restart the engine and just make sure we don't have any leaks. Now that's all I needed to do. I noticed, you see, I checked right around the bottom of that filter to make sure that I didn't have any oil leaks, and of course I could look underneath it, and I will, to make sure that drain plug is not leaking too. But the point is that I got oil pressure right back on my gauge inside the car, so that's a good clue that I've got solid oil pressure. I just want to make sure that I also don't have any drips or